I've been wondering how to start tonight. Normally it's, hey, how are you guys doing? Welcome to the show. But tonight, I don't have that in me. We had Katie Pasitny on last night from Universal Ostrich Farm. You may have seen that show. They were awaiting the court ruling, and it hadn't come down yet. And I asked her one question that I thought would be very difficult to answer towards the end of that discussion last night. I said, will you be on site when the CFIA agents come to cull the birds, if that comes to pass? And she said, yes, we will. We'll need as many people here as possible, as many cameras as possible. Well, today that ruling came down, and the ostriches will be culled. So we're going to cover that in the first part of the show tonight, unless a miracle happens. And we can always hold out hope, I suppose. Jim Kerr has been there for a while. He's our buddy on the ground there. He's been doing daily reports, hourly in some cases. And we've got some video from him to play for you, and also from the owner of the Ostrich Farm. Katie's mom, Karen, put out a very heartfelt message just a few minutes ago that we're going to play for you as well. It's amazing how you can have feelings like this for people and animals that you've never met, that you're 2,000, 3,000 miles away from. But we are a community, and we feel. And we've been following this. We feel for Karen, Katie, all of the people who have been there showing support. Obviously, the ostriches, and they don't know. They're animals. They have no idea what's coming. What about these CFIA goons who are going to come out and do this job? Do they have any feelings at all about this? I mean, this is going to be something straight out of a horror movie, if you want my honest opinion. There's 400 healthy ostriches on this farm. I can't even imagine what that carnage is going to be like. So let's get down to it. The Shadow at Night live stream, as always, is brought to you by CanadaNanoSilver.com.
Discover the future of natural wellness with Canada Nano Silver. Trusted by families across Canada, our Nano Silver solutions are designed to support your immune system every single day. Whether you're protecting your kids, boosting your own immunity, or caring for aging parents, Nano Silver helps keep your whole household healthier. Our advanced formula harnesses the natural power of silver at the microscopic level, fighting bacteria, supporting healing, and enhancing your body's defenses. From immune gummies to soothing gel and powerful liquid drops, we offer a complete lineup for your family's well-being. It's not just protection. It's peace of mind, powered by science. Choose Canada Nano Silver, because your family deserves the best in natural immune support.
CanadaNanoSilver.com. Again, that is CanadaNanoSilver.com. To get a hold of Kevin and Anna with any questions, you just go ahead and click the contact tab. It's on the very upper right-hand corner of the website, and they'll get back to you ASAP. CanadaNanoSilver.com. All right, let me throw this up here on the screen. From the Save Our Ostriches X account, the official announcement, federal court decision in Universal. I'm not going to read the entire judge's decision. It's long, it's involved. This is the official statement. Universal Ostrich Farms versus Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Dear friends and supporters, we're absolutely devastated to share today's federal court decision issued, today. The court ruled in favor of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, upholding their order to destroy our beloved ostriches and rejecting our plea to save them. And if you guys have been following this, you know it's not just about family pets. There is so much more to this. The court's decision accepted the CFIA's justification under the Health of Animals Act and their use of the stamping out policy, which mandates the destruction of animals to control disease outbreaks, even though these are healthy birds, regardless of their health status. Like, where's the logic in any of this, right? The court confirmed the CFIA's approach, prioritizing trade obligations over the welfare of our animals. In addition, we've been ordered to pay $15,000 in CFIA's legal costs, adding insult to injury. That's my words, not theirs. And the full decision is tacked to it if you want to read that. It's on their X and Facebook. And the website, saveourostriches.com. We are heartbroken by this outcome and uncertain about the future of our farm. As we navigate this incredibly difficult time, we ask for your patience and continued support. If you're able, please consider making a donation to help us manage the financial and emotional toll this has taken. Now, if you saw the interview, the conversation with Katie and I last night, you know that Katie is not just fighting, and the entire family is not just fighting for themselves and the ostriches because they're family pets. That's one aspect of it, sure. They're fighting for all farmers in this country. Imagine if you're a cattle farmer and some weird thing, some bovine thing started to spread around, and one of your cattle died mysteriously, but all the rest were fine. Then CFIA could come in and say, we're not taking any chances. We're going to kill this 300 head of, or however many head of cattle that you have. And you would be completely and totally financially destroyed. And they are doing that, by the way. That is happening, not just at the ostrich farm, but all over the country. And there are farmers who are standing up against it. Right now, they're doing it anonymously. And I wish that they would stand up and show their faces and speak out, because you can't hide behind a tree anymore, man. Anonymity is our biggest enemy. CFIA could never do this if there was a massive backlash, I mean massive, across the country to save the ostriches and in turn save all the other farms that are being systematically destroyed by the Canadian government under the guise of keeping communities safe and healthy. And you know where I'm going with that. Here's Jim Kerr. He has been on the ground at the ostrich farm for the past, I'm going to say the past few weeks, with a video he put up a couple of hours ago.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Update from the ostrich farm here. We have confirmation from insider sources that the team, or whoever they are, the contractors, whoever the government contracts, and we don't know who that is yet, so if you want to look into that, that would be helpful. We are looking into it, but we need more help. Who is the contractor that the government has employed to come in here and kill these animals? We have confirmation that it's going to happen within the next 1 to 4 days. Okay, folks, so there's nothing legally stopping these people from coming in and killing these healthy animals. It doesn't matter how much common sense it makes. There's nothing stopping them, and they're hell-bent on and determined to make this happen. Let me tell you about something else. Looks like, you know this dump? You ever see the pictures of the dump, Uchichinia dump or something, and how they're preparing for these birds? Did you realize that as early as last year, they had the contract to dig those holes? Now, doesn't that kind of sound like maybe they might have known this was coming? Doesn't that kind of sound like maybe they didn't come here and test the birds they already knew what the test results were because they knew what they wanted to make happen? Interesting, eh? There's all kinds of aspects of this story that stink to high heaven, folks. And unless we stand up against the corruption, unless we stand up against the violence that's going to be incited upon this family and these birds, unless we do that, you might as well say goodbye to Canada.
He's right. We let them get away with this under false pretenses, which is obviously what it is. The birds are all healthy. I'm not sure exactly how many days Katie pointed it out last night, but it's over 100. What's the point in this? We're trying to keep you safe. We don't want this to jump to humans. Birds are safe. Birds are healthy. Here's Karen Esperson. That's Katie's mom. She's been the owner of this place for 40 years.
Hi everyone, this is Karen at the Ostrich Farm. The day came, we never thought we'd have this happen. If we ever needed anybody's help, it's today. I see all these guys behind me. See these beautiful, majestic birds. You see this? These are our pets. This is what CFIA says that they're going to come. They've been approved 1 to 4 days to come kill them. We've taken years to be able to pet these guys, walk amongst these guys. We love these guys. They're all happy and healthy. If we don't stand for this and we don't pull together and we don't save all of these beautiful, happy, healthy animals, then what kind of world have we become? If I've ever asked for anything, we're asking for an SOS, and we need people to come to our farm today to stand up and do something. They say they're coming in 1 to 4 days. The dump's supposed to be ready for bodies. You guys, please, if we've ever pleaded, we're asking now for everybody to be that one voice. We can make the change. We just have to do it together. We can't let them do this. Please come to the farm, 301 Langell Road. Come surround the farm. Don't let them do this to these beautiful animals.
301 Langille Road, Langille. Of course, no violence. These birds have obviously developed an immunity to H5N1, avian flu. And the eggs they produce contain those antibodies, that immunity. This farm is working with a scientist in Japan to try and isolate those antibodies and come up with an actual natural vaccine to H5N1. But that's not what the government wants. That's not what Big Pharma wants. And so they're going to move in there and they're going to destroy these birds. There's over 400 of them. Some of them are 7 feet tall, many of them over 300 pounds. This is going to be a complete and utter slaughter. I don't know how they plan to do it. 1 to 4 days. Are they just going to walk onto the farm with rifles and start shooting? And then what, drag out the carcasses in trucks to the landfill, which is a biohazard, by the way. Katie pointed that out last night. I wondered if I was going to get past this segment of the show and carry on into other things that are going on. And yeah, I am. Harold Jonker is on trial in Ottawa right now. He was one of the road captains in the Freedom Convoy. Now, I know that a lot of people are concerned about Tamara and Chris, and rightly so. The government is trying to take Big Red. They're trying to give these two 10 years in jail each, fine them thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. By the way, the sentencing is going to be later on this month, in a couple of weeks. We'll try and get Chris and Tamara or one or the other on the show to talk about it. But Harold Jonker, nobody has talked about really. I had him on the show once. I'm going to say it was 2.5 years ago when he was first charged, and his trial has finally come up. This is from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom. Criminal trial proceedings continue for Harold Jonker, trucker from Niagara, who is, by the way, very highly respected in his field and in his community. He owns a trucking company based in the township of West Lincoln in the Niagara region of Ontario at the beginning of 2022. He was also an elected part-time town councillor for the township. On January 15th, 2022, the government of Canada mandated that Canadians who had not received 2 doses of an approved COVID vaccine would not be permitted to travel across the border between Canada and the United States. I know many of you know all of this, but we do have new viewers who are unaware. This mandate effectively put unvaccinated truckers out of business. In response, thousands of truckers and concerned Canadians traveled to the nation's capital in January and February, 3 years ago now, over 3 years, to protest vaccine mandates. Mr. Jonker joined the protest as a route captain for the Niagara portion of the Freedom Convoy, arriving in Ottawa January 28th. He stayed in the capital for 3 weeks. While there, he did not park his truck downtown, parking instead along Coventry Road some distance away. During that time, he was not fined or charged with any criminal offense. On February 14th, the Government of Canada declared a public order emergency and invoked the Emergencies Act for the first time in Canadian history. Successor to the War Measures Act, the Emergencies Act grants the federal government unprecedented executive powers to handle threats to the security of Canada. The invocation of the Emergencies Act transformed the peaceful atmosphere of the Freedom Convoy protest into a tactical operation, as hundreds of armed officers descended on protesters and passers-by. The police crackdown began in earnest on February the 18th. Within 3 days, the streets of downtown Ottawa were empty, but social media platforms were full of scenes of brutal police action. More than 400 charges were laid during the suppression of the protest. More than 257 bank accounts associated with the Freedom Convoy were also frozen, making it difficult for some Canadians to travel home or meet expenses. Mr. Jonker returned to the Niagara region February 21st, 2022. Several councillors of the township of West Lincoln were openly opposed to the Freedom Convoy and to any protests against the government's response to COVID. On February 28th, 2022, a complaint was filed against Mr. Jonker, claiming that he had breached the township's code of conduct by attending the Freedom Convoy. The township launched an investigation determining that Freedom Convoy was an illegal protest and that Mr. Jonker had violated the code of ethics by joining it. Of course, we all know that it's not illegal. It's never been illegal, no matter what the government has been saying about it. On July the 18th, 2022, the township fined Mr. Jonker 30 days' pay and demanded that he repay the value of any food and gasoline donated to him by Canadians during his involvement with the protest. The Integrity Commissioner's report relies on many allegations about the Freedom Convoy, none of which have been proven in a court of law, Mr. Jonker said at the council meeting. He stated, "I went to the protest as a truck driver and as a company owner to support what I believe was a peaceful, lawful demonstration." He was there for 3 weeks. He should know of anybody. On September 23rd of 2022, the lawyers at JCCF launched a lawsuit on behalf of Mr. Jonker, seeking to strike down the township's decision to finally punish him for his participation in the Freedom Convoy. The lawyers argued that their decision is invalid due to procedural irregularities, factual errors, and flawed findings in the investigative report. Notably, the lawyers challenged that the finding that Mr. Jonker had participated in an illegal activity. The lawsuit also claims that the township's decision violated his freedom of expression protected by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The claim that Mr. Jonker participated in an illegal activity is a suggestion that is not supported by facts. It's also bewildering. The Integrity Commissioner found that Mr. Jonker, who is a trucker, was in Ottawa in connection with his duties as a town councillor rather than as a trucker and a Canadian citizen peacefully protesting federal and provincial COVID mandates, stated lawyer Jorge Pineda. The sad truth is that Mr. Jonker has been punished for his political position in the context of an ongoing dispute with other councillors. In Canada, we must tolerate strong differences in political opinion. Elected politicians should not be permitted to weaponize codes of conduct to silence and intimidate their political opponents. They're still doing it, by the way. Just ask Lisa Robinson over in Pickering. The Charter is intended to guarantee free expression. Canadian democratic institutions cannot survive if such guarantees can be easily ignored through these kinds of tactics. 15 months later, after the Freedom Convoy protest in May 2023, police charged Mr. Jonker with mischief, counseling mischief, obstructing a roadway, and counseling others to obstruct a roadway. Police alleged that Mr. Jonker had been a road captain during the Freedom Convoy, that he led the Niagara contingent from the Niagara region to Ottawa, that he co-owns a trucking company, and that he brought 10 Jonker trucking trucks to Ottawa with him. Why was there such a significant delay in bringing these charges? The Crown did not disclose that reason. Mr. Jonker's 10-day criminal trial is scheduled for, right now, until the 26th. At the Ontario Superior Court of Justice in Ottawa, he is chosen to be judged by a jury of his peers. Mr. Jonker's defense will argue that his prosecution is an abusive process due to the lengthy and unexplained pre-charge delay. They will argue that this significant delay has unfairly compromised Mr. Jonker's ability to make a full answer in defense to his charges. Lawyer Chris Fleury stated, Mr. Jonker and I are looking forward to defending these charges at trial and fervently asserting his innocence. We're also looking forward to cross-examining the Crown witnesses and discovering the reason for the significant and unexplained delay in charging Mr. Jonker. In May of 2023, Mr. Jonker was also named as a defendant in the cases Zexi Lee versus Chris Barber et al. Zexi Lee and other Ottawa residents are suing Mr. Jonker and other Freedom Convoy participants for $290 million. I say again, $290 million, seeking damages against peaceful protesters for allegedly causing a nuisance through honking or idling of vehicle engines in downtown Ottawa. Yesterday, Monday, May 12th, the judge in the Jonker trial rejected the Crown's last-minute attempt to have a witness testify remotely over vague safety concerns and required the witness to appear in person for full testimony and cross-examination. Defense lawyers also gained key admissions from Crown witnesses, including that emergency routes remained accessible throughout the Freedom Convoy. And again, this trial will continue for the next week or week and a half. So that's something that we'll be following, because there are others that have been on trial outside of Chris and Tamara, and they would be the first ones to tell you that. From lawyer Bruce Party on X, here's another ruling that you might be happy about. Alberta court finds WestJet wrongfully terminated unvaxxed employee. Yesterday, the Alberta Court of Justice awarded severance to a former WestJet employee fired because she declined to take the COVID vaccine. This decision may be the first in Canada to award severance to a non-unionized employee for being terminated rather than being placed on indefinite leave for refusing the vax. If you're aware of others, please note in the replies. Bruce says, Jiang Yi worked for WestJet for 11 years. Before she was fired, she applied to be exempted from WestJet's mandatory COVID vaccination policy on religious grounds. Employers can terminate employees if they're not part of a union, which is a different story, either for cause or without cause. But if they terminate without cause, employees are entitled to notice or to severance in lieu of notice. In this case, WestJet claimed to have fired Yi for cause for violating its vaccination policy. Employers carry the onus of proving just cause. Well, the court did not find WestJet's vaccination policy to be unreasonable. It did find the company's treatment of Yi's application for exemption to be deficient. Yi said that taking the vaccine would have betrayed her Christian faith. Jesus is my healer, she wrote. I do not rely on the use of vaccinations or medicines created artificially in order to prevent sickness. Jesus speaks of seeking out a doctor when one is sick, not well. I have no need of a vaccine in order to maintain my health. The application form asked Yi if she had concerns about the safety of the vaccine. She said yes. No long-term safety has been completed to ensure they're safe and effective. mRNA is a new technology and side effects completely unknown, never been licensed for human use. When long-term studies have been completed to ensure long-term studies have been completed to ensure they're safe and effective. They're still in phase 3 experiments, and that will not be completed until the end of 2022. But because she expressed concerns about safety, WestJet rejected her application for an exemption. You've written in your application form that you consider the vaccine unsafe. It's therefore reasonable to consider that you are philosophically, personally opposed to mandatory vaccine, which means you are seeking accommodation for secular reasons, not religious. The court found that WestJet's refusal to grant the plaintiff an exemption, even though it accepted the sincerity of her religious beliefs, was not reasonable. The defendant's evidence did not explain why the plaintiff's information was insufficient, why her safety concerns overrode her religious objections, or what she could have done to qualify for an exemption. But the most intriguing aspect of the decision was the court's finding that Yi's termination was unjustified, even absent the request for religious accommodation. At the time of her dismissal, Yi had already been working at home for months. There was no evidence that her refusal to vaccinate would have affected the operation of her department or WestJet's other employees. The court concluded that dismissal for cause was not a proportional response, even if the plaintiff should not have been granted a religious exemption. The court awarded Yi 11 months of severance. Note that even when employers are found to have wrongfully terminated a non-unionized employee, reinstatement is not usually one of the possible remedies. Congratulations to the plaintiff and her lawyer. The decision is not yet posted on CanLII, the Canadian Legal Information Institute database, so you heard it here first if you're not on X. Mark Carney appointed his new cabinet today, and we're going to get to this great piece from the National Post in just a second. But first, this is Mark Carney on how his government will function moving forward.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Rachel Aiello, CTV News. You're 2 seats shy of 1, but should Canadians expect you to govern like you have a majority?
Thank you for the question. We ran a very clear campaign on our priorities, standing up to the U.S., getting the best possible relationship, security and economic relationship, but then at the core, building the strongest economy in the G7, economy that works for everyone. I'll remind, not you, you'll know this, but those watching, we received more votes than anyone else in any election. We are in a position where we have cabinet members from all the provinces. I'm very proud of that, and a cabinet member from full cabinet member from the territories. So we're governing for all Canadians, all regions, with a strong and clear mandate that came out of the election, and that's how we will govern.
Where's a strong and clear mandate, dude? You're in a minority situation. You are in a minority government, which we're going to get to in just a second. Currently, they have 169 seats, with the one that was added in Terrabonne, Quebec, just the other day over the weekend. But there is a dispute about that. There's a story about that, and we're going to get to that. But Danielle Smith, this is what she said last week. Carney said he's going to govern for all Canadians in all regions. Well, time to put up or shut up, bud. Live up to the expectations of the Premier and the people of Alberta.
That is why a large majority of Albertans are so deeply frustrated with the results of last week's federal election. It's not that our preferred candidate and party lost. That happens in a democracy. It's that the same Liberal government with almost all the same ministers responsible for our nation's inflation, housing, crime, and budget crisis, and that oversaw the attack on our provincial economy for the past 10 years, have been returned to power. Now, as we all know, one thing has changed. We have a new Prime Minister. And I will say that in my first conversation with him since the election, he had some promising things to say about changing the direction of his government's anti-resource policies. However, Albertans are more of a actions speak louder than words kind of people. So while I will in good faith work with Prime Minister Mark Carney on unwinding the mountain of destructive legislation and policies that have ravaged our provincial and national economies this past decade, until I see tangible proof of real change, Alberta will be taking steps to better protect ourselves from Ottawa. As a start, I will soon appoint a special negotiating team to represent our province in negotiations with the federal government on the following reforms requested by our province. We hope this will result in a binding agreement that Albertans can have confidence in. Call it an Alberta Accord, if you will. First, Alberta requires guaranteed corridor and port access to tidewater off the Pacific, Arctic, and Atlantic coasts for the international export of Alberta oil, gas, critical minerals, and other resources in amounts supported by the free market rather than by the dictates and whims of Ottawa. Every province in the country, other than Alberta and Saskatchewan, have coastal port access, and no province needs it more given the size and value of our resources. This will benefit all Canadians to the tune of trillions of dollars of economic activity, including billions for First Nations partners. Second, The federal government must end all federal interference in the development of provincial resources by repealing the No New Pipelines Law, C-69, the oil tanker ban, the net zero electricity regulations, the oil and gas emissions cap, the net zero vehicle mandate, and any federal law or regulation that purports to regulate industrial carbon emissions, plastics, or the commercial free speech of energy companies. These laws are destroying investment confidence and costing Canada and Alberta hundreds of billions in investments each year. They need to go. Third, the federal government must refrain from imposing export taxes or restrictions on the export of Alberta resources without the consent of the government of Alberta. Frankly, all provinces should be given that same respect for their resources.
Well, she's absolutely right. Yesterday, she also said that Alberta will not be raising the industrial carbon tax on any of the energy industries in that province. They didn't decrease it, but they say they're not going to increase it either, which is a thumb directly in Mark Carney's eye. Now, Mark Carney keeps saying we have a strong mandate to from the people of Canada to govern, and we will govern for all regions. You know what he said. But they don't have a strong mandate. They've been trying to get one. There's 3 judicial recounts going on right now across the country. We haven't got the results of those yet. But one was settled apparently over the weekend in Terrabonne, Quebec, where originally the Bloc Québécois had won this riding. And then after the recount, it was determined that the Liberals had won the riding by 1 vote. 1 vote. But now we have another story that a woman who voted for the Bloc did not have her mail-in vote counted. It was returned to sender because of a bad postal code or something. Elections Canada says it's investigating after a voter in a Quebec riding came forward with an envelope that had been returned to sender. Inside was a vote for the Bloc Québécois in the Terrabonne riding, where, as it stands, incoming Liberal MP Tatiana Auguste was declared the winner by 1 vote after several recounts. Elections Canada said the return address printed on this elector's return envelope was incorrect, specifically part of the postal code. We're all working to gather the facts. We'll be able to get back to you as soon as we have more information, the agency said to the CBC. The voter, however, remains irked by the situation. Terrebonne resident Emmanuel Bossé said she sent in her vote on time for the April 28th election. I wasn't the one who got Elections Canada's address wrong on the envelope, she told Radio Canada. Elections Canada glued this label on the envelope. I had nothing to fill. I just had to put my vote in there. She says she mailed her vote in April the 5th, and it was returned to her on May the 2nd. August's 1-vote victory was highly unusual, making international headlines and attracting significant attention on social media as she appeared to flip a riding long held by the Bloc. On election night, Terrebonne initially went to Auguste by 35 votes, but after a standard validation process, the result flipped to the incumbent, Bloc Québécois MP Nathalie Sinclair de Gagné by 44 votes. This triggered an automatic judicial recount. A few days later, the results of the recount showed that Auguste had won by a single vote. I think it's a first in history, said a political commentator, Frederick Berard. To recap, on election day, voters go to polling stations and cast their ballots. Once the polls close, Elections Canada workers hand count the ballots and report the results to a returning officer. The results are then next posted online, and next comes the validation process. We don't know what's going to happen here, my friends. This could be interesting. If this vote does get counted, we've got a tie. What does that mean? They have a by-election? Straighten the whole thing out once and for all? A do-over? Best 2 out of 3? Flip a coin? It's insane. Completely insane. Oh, by the way, after Mark Carney appointed his cabinet today, and there's a lot of the old ministers in this new cabinet, a reporter from CTV, I think, asked Mark Carney if he was poaching, or trying to poach anyway, MPs from the NDP to join the Liberals so they can form a majority. Watch this.
Reaching out and calling NDP individuals about trying to poach them to join your party. Are you trying to poach NDP MPs to join the Liberals?
Look, we... as I said a moment ago, we have a clear mandate. We'll work towards that clear mandate. We're always interested in working with parliamentarians from any of the opposition parties to support that mandate. Obviously, those discussions will intensify as Parliament returns in the course of the next, well, it's less than 2 weeks. So clear mandate, focus on those. Speech from the throne will be quite clear in terms of our priorities. We'll work with Parliament.
Did he answer that question anywhere in that rebuttal? Did he say anything about poaching? No, we've got a clear mandate. We've got a strong mandate. We're going to work with other parties in the House of Commons to achieve consensus. He didn't answer it, which means, yeah, they've been trying to poach NDP MPs, and so far they're out of luck. Now, right now, like I said, the Liberals have got 169 seats in the House of Commons. This is close to a majority. If they manage to win all of these judicial recounts that are ongoing, they'll have 172 seats. They'll have to appoint a House Speaker, which will reduce them to 171 seats. But in the case of any parliamentary tie on anything, the tie goes to the Speaker. And because the Speaker comes from the Liberal Party, you can bet he or she will be voting for the Liberals. So everything will pass. However, with a 1-seat majority, what if somebody gets sick? What if somebody can't show up for a vote? What if somebody dies? What if somebody just quits? What if somebody crosses the floor? Anything could happen, you guys. I mean, if we're talking about a majority that we have absolutely no chance of overcoming, it's got to be by at least 10 seats, because things happen in every parliament and in every electoral term. And with a 1-seat majority, which they won't get, by the way, I'm pretty convinced they won't get, they're going to fall. And they will fall in the next 12 to 18 months. But the damage they could do between now and then could be completely irreversible, which means that Alberta will probably move forward with separation if they can get the support of the people of Alberta. Now, we're going to have Jeff Rath on the show tonight from the Alberta Prosperity Project, but the dummy double booked himself. He's speaking at a conference in Ponoka tonight, so we rescheduled Jeff's appearance for Thursday night. And Jeff is also a lawyer, right? And he's been very involved with Indigenous rights in Alberta and across the country for the past, 30 years, I guess. That's been his bread and butter. That's what he's dedicated his career to. And he is, as far as I'm concerned anyway, the authority on Indigenous rights. So do the First Nations people have any sort of veto, any sort of say-so over Alberta leaving Confederation, if it comes to that, if the vote actually is successful? I know there's a lot of chiefs been making noise, and Jeff and I talked on the phone about this afternoon. He said, no, they don't really have any legal recourse. And I'll tell you what, the NDP got to them, and they've been rooting them on. So that's why they've been doing this. So I would imagine that Jeff will be able to talk to many of these chiefs over the next few months and calm them down about the situation, and maybe get them to stop speaking publicly about things that they seem completely unaware of. There is no interlocutor at all in any of these treaties that says, oh, and by the way, if the province that the treaty is signed in decides it wants to leave Confederation, that gives you some sort of magic veto power. It doesn't. It would go on like any other contract. You know, when a new company buys an existing company, they also buy the employees along with them. And generally speaking, there's sort of a clause that lasts anywhere between 12 and 24 months that says you have to treat these employees the same way that we were treating them during the transition phase. After that 2 years is over, then you can do what you want. But in that 2 years, I would imagine that many of these chiefs, these First Nation chiefs, would be able to strike an even better deal with the government of Alberta, but a deal that works for both sides. One that's not so, well, you know what? I don't want to get myself in any more trouble than I usually get into tonight. So I'll say one-sided, that both sides can really benefit from all of the enormous wealth in the ground in that province. So it would be a better situation for First Nations. And I don't know why they don't seem to understand that at this point. Getting to that National Post article that I had thrown up on the screen earlier, Michael Higgins wrote this: Carney's cabinet of Trudeau failures. Canadians thought Carney would bring change. they were wrong. Prime Minister Mark Carney promised change. And hang on, let me shut this down before it starts to. There we go. All right. So he promised. By the way, we'll get to Poilievre's comments about all this in just a second. A new way of doing things at speeds never before seen. Yet to help him do this, he's relying on the same old tired, incompetent ministers who got us into the mess we're currently in. The Liberals will trumpet the large number of new faces in Carney's 28-member cabinet. There are 15 MPs who have never served in cabinet before. But the top tier of ministers, the ones sitting in the front row at the swearing-in ceremony on Tuesday, were all former Trudeau acolytes, cabinet ministers now committed to rescuing us from a crisis of their own making. In the front row, Sean Fraser, our new Justice Minister and Attorney General, and the man who, under Justin Trudeau, was responsible for immigration and then housing, two files he spectacularly failed at. If we want to know how bad Fraser was in those jobs, we need only look to Carney's election platform. He said, "The last time we faced a housing crisis at such a broad scale was after the Second World War," read the platform. This crisis has left younger generations facing rents, down payments, and mortgage payments so high that it turned housing into a barrier to opportunity instead of a cornerstone to opportunity. Sean Fraser, I did that. And now he's the Attorney General. What about Fraser's record at immigration? According to the Liberal platform, the Trudeau government let immigration grow at a rapid and unsustainable pace. In December, when Liberal fortunes were in the toilet, Fraser announced that for family reasons, he was quitting politics. And strangely, after the party witnessed a reversal in the polls, he announced that he was returning. In Carney's eyes, Fraser's blundering on two key files qualifies him to be Justice Minister. The only thing worse than Fraser as a cabinet minister may be Carney's judgment. But don't take this guy's word for it or mine. Here's Pierre Poilievre talking about it today.
In his first press conference, Mr. Carney talked a good game about reversing Liberal policies in these areas, but now we have to find out if he was serious. And so far, it's not a promising start. The first disappointment is, unfortunately, his cabinet. He appointed Trudeau's Old Team and Trudeau's Old Advisors. Stephen Guilbeault, whose radical green agenda would shut down all future developments in our resource industry, is still the minister responsible for Quebec. Sean Fraser was the immigration minister who caused the immigration crisis, the housing minister who gave us the housing crisis, and now he's the minister responsible for addressing the Liberal crime crisis. It seems like he is the master at failing upward. Chrystia Freeland, who as finance minister hiked capital gains tax and carbon taxes and massively grew our debt to the point where we now spend $1 billion a week on interest, stays in the cabinet. Then there's Gary Anadesangari, the new Minister of Public Safety, who said the actual crimes, the actual issues around bail are quite sound, and they are embedded in, codified in law right now, as in to say that there's nothing wrong with the system. Well, in fact, there's everything wrong, as we see from the growing crime wave on our streets. Then there's François-Philippe Champagne, Trudeau's Minister of Everything, who never really managed to do anything. And he did it very loudly.
So he goes on to roast this new Liberal cabinet. But at the beginning of that press conference, something I didn't show you is that Poilievre came out, spoke in French for the first 10 minutes, and then started speaking in English. And he said, "We are not going to instinctively oppose everything the Liberals do. We're going to give them time. We're going to give some breathing room to see if, in fact, Mark Carney is true to his word and that he does change certain Liberal policies that are absolutely reprehensible to many millions of Canadians." And then he started roasting the cabinet. The CBC didn't like that too much. Here they are talking about Pierre's reaction to the Carney cabinet.
And talking about how he would not be opposing the government reflexively, that he would do things in the best interest of the country and support the government in those issues, and that he says he wants the country to succeed. He then spent the next 15 minutes talking about all the ministers who were there previously and the things they did to ruin the country, naming particularly Sean Fraser and Stephen Guilbeault, taking some questions about how he will approach things inside the House of Commons, but overall, you know, it started out in one tone and finished in another. That's all I'll say, because he leaned into attacking the people that he thinks still represent, don't represent change, are still more of the Trudeau government, and particularly don't represent the things that he thinks Canadians want right now.
Yeah, cabinet is broken, is essentially what he said, right? It's no longer Canada's broken. He's saying this cabinet is not change. A style and approach from Mr. Poilievre, Rosie, that would suggest it's almost as if he won the election rather than lost the election and lost his own seat. You know, talking about how he's going to stand there in defense of Canadians. He'll only be able to stand there, actually, in the chamber behind him, because of the goodwill.
You know, it's interesting listening to these two absolutely mock Pierre Poilievre, who is still, by the way, the leader of the opposition. Just because he doesn't have a seat doesn't take that job away from him, and he will have a seat soon enough in Alberta. Why aren't these two just wearing red Liberal Party of Canada t-shirts? The one thing that drives me crazy about the CBC, aside from the fact that we know they're partisan, is that they say they are right down the middle. And they're not. You guys know where I stand, obviously. The way I report things to you obviously comes from a right slant, correct? A freedom slant, a truth slant. These guys comes from the left, way from the left. But yet they say that they are absolutely non-partisan journalists. Isn't that something?
Of the Prime Minister, who's going to call an early by-election for Mr. Poilievre so he can run in one of his MP seats in Alberta at the cost of close to $2 million to have a by-election, all while he stays in Stornoway throughout this. So it's interesting that given that sequence of events and given those series of factors, that it was that kind of approach and response to things there from Mr. Poilievre. Going after Stephen Guilbeault, talking about the radical environmental agenda, blaming Sean Fraser for the housing crisis, which is... Sean Fraser's I don't think he's 40 yet, or he's just 40. I don't think he caused the housing crisis in Canada.
Not.
There's a whole bunch of layers and effects of that. But, you know, wanting to fight the same political battles we just endured during the 5 weeks of the campaign and for the 2 years leading up to that.
Well, he should be fighting these same political battles that he's been fighting for the past 2 years, because it's the same people in these jobs. And his job is to be the leader of the opposition. And he did say at the beginning of his press conference, like I pointed out, he did say, look, we're not going to react instinctively. We're not going to oppose ideologically. We're going to listen to everything the government says. If we don't agree with it, of course, we'll stand up and oppose it. But Poilievre said, we want Canada to do well. And we are rooting for Mark Carney to live up to his word. Which word, I don't know, because there seem to be two Mark Carneys, one that talks out of this side of his face and one that talks out of this side of his face, depending on what part of the country he's in or what ideological mood he finds himself in. Is he the Mark Carney from his book, or is he the Mark Carney who said we're going to get an east-west energy corridor going and we're going to start digging in the Ring of Fire in Ontario? I don't know. Actually, I do. You know who Mark Carney is, and you know what he's going to do and what he's not going to do. Pierre Poilievre today was also asked about Alberta separation. Here's what he said.
Willing to publicly denounce Alberta separatism and the Alberta separatist movement ahead of a possible referendum on Alberta independence next year?
Look, I'm against separation. I'm a born and raised Albertan. I love Canada. I think we need to unite this country. Albertans have a lot of legitimate grievances. I mean, let's be blunt. Canada's biggest industry, which happens to largely be situated in Alberta, has been under attack for the last decade. They've lost two major pipelines, a $20 billion mine. There's a new ridiculous energy cap that's going to drive jobs and production south to the United States of America. There's an industrial carbon tax that's going to kill the industry. And so, frankly, Albertans have a right to be frustrated. And I think the message to the government in Ottawa, the Liberal government, is you can't tell Alberta to just pay up and shut up. Albertans want to be part of a united Canada, but they deserve to be treated with respect, and they deserve to be honored for the immense contribution that they make to this country. And I will be a unifier who works to bring all Albertans to a place where they feel that they are respected and honored in our wonderful country.
Well, what else is he going to say? Yeah, I'm all on board, man. No, he's a federal politician. He has to say that he doesn't want Alberta to leave. Even if he had won the election, he would have to say that. He would have to say that. As the Prime Minister of Canada, he would have to say that. Now, remember the Chinese ambassador to Canada that I put on the show yesterday? He was on the Vashi Capello show
with another
on CTV. And the Chinese say, hey, look, we just want a great deal with Canada, and we don't interfere with what's going on in your politics, by the way.
And
what?
that also applies to state-to-state relations as well. And another thing for China and Canada to bring our relationship back onto the right track is that we need to seek common ground while reserving differences in a constructive way. China and Canada have a lot of differences, and this is very, very normal. Because we are different in history, we are different in culture, and we are different in political systems, and many other factors. But one very important goal of two countries to develop a relationship is to serve the interests of the people of the two countries. Whether China has interfered in Canada's internal affairs and whether China is a security threat to China, I have made China's position very clearly multiple times, and I am ready to share it with you here today as well. I can say it very clearly to you that China has never and does not have any interest in interfering in Canada's internal affairs.
Really? All right. Let's bring this up here. This comes from Sam Cooper, the Bureau, on Substack. Pro-Beijing diaspora group that lobbied to oust O'Toole now calls for Pierre Poilievre's resignation amid PRC interference probes. Calls for Poilievre to step down follows pattern of strategic diaspora messaging amid national security scrutiny over foreign interference networks. But hey, no, we have never interfered in your politics in Canada, just so you know. Believe me, man. Trust me. We didn't. Yeah, you did. Here's another one for you. Ontario Mayor remains hopeful Honda's EV plant will be built despite delay. I'm not sure if you heard this, but Honda Canada has decided to postpone for 2 years the building of this new EV plant in Ontario. And the mayor of an Ontario municipality is set to be the home for Honda's now postponed $15 billion electric vehicle project, said today he's not giving up hope on the plant. This is near Windsor. New Tecumseh Mayor Richard Norcross said he is disappointed with Honda's decision, but he'll continue to advocate for the project, blah, 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 blah. So Honda receives $2.5 billion in funding from the federal government through incentives and tax breaks. Another $2.5 billion in funding through incentives and tax breaks from the Ontario government, totaling $5 billion with a B. No, you know what? We're not going to build it for a couple more years. We're not really as excited about it as we were just last July. Last July, here's Justin Trudeau and Doug Ford just going on and on about the new economy, and everybody's going to be driving an EV in less than 10 years.
The Conservative Party of Canada has said very clearly it would not have made this choice of investing in EVs, investing in workers. But the reality is, as a great Canadian once said, you need to go where the puck is going. The global economy is going towards net zero. Manufacturing is going towards electric vehicles. In the EV industry, the Government of Ontario, Canada has positioned itself to be a leader in the EV industry, and we will continue to be, because those are where the jobs are going to be, not just a couple of years from now, but a decade from now, a generation from now, and over the coming decades.
Yeah, like that big cricket powder factory in London, Ontario that closed down after all that government funding. That should be good news to people like us. Their plan is not working. Maybe that's why they tried to send in Mark Carney. But don't think for one second that Donald Trump doesn't know what Mark Carney is trying to do. He knows. He absolutely knows. Even as he was over in Saudi Arabia today, Trump, making billions of dollars in new deals. $600 billion in new deals with the Saudis apparently today. Here's Charlie Kirk and Rand Paul discussing it.
News today is that President Donald Trump is in Saudi Arabia announcing a closer partnership with many Gulf states. Something I know that you and I both care about is trying to prevent a war with Iran. It seems as if some of the neocons in D.C. have been talking about more and more military engagement in Yemen and against Iran. How do you think we should balance an alliance with some Gulf states, all the while trying to prevent another no-win, endless war in the Middle East?
You know, I commend the president for going to the Middle East. Some of the Democrats are up in arms, criticizing it. But part of diplomacy is showing up, being in the areas, talking to the leaders, and then ultimately trying to, resolve differences with diplomacy rather than war. I do think that the wars in the Middle East and the tension in the Middle East, sometimes we don't pay enough attention to the conflict that is between Iran and Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. So there's considerable amount of tension, and it goes into the thinking of Iran as well, not just their animosity or relationship with the U.S., but also their relationship with Israel, which is pretty obvious, but then also their relationship with the Gulf states as well. And ultimately, to get to some sort of peace agreement with Iran, I'm proud of President Trump for actually opening dialogue and discussion, but to get to peace, ultimately, it has to, I think, sort of include some of the Gulf states as well, including Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia could be a more constructive player here, and hopefully that's part of the discussions.
Yeah, and so let's broaden this a little bit more. There are some in D.C. that seem so insistent on trying to escalate military tensions with Iran. You are, without a doubt, one of the most morally clear and principled members of the Republican Conference against war and actually want to see us invest money and in our own country and to defend liberty. What is the status of this? It seems like there's been an increase in the amount of chatter about potential military strikes against Iran. Let me ask it this way. Why would an American military strike against Iran be a bad idea? Some people in our audience who I really respect say, Charlie, they can't have a nuclear weapon. It's just military strikes. It's just airstrikes against an airfield. Or against
I think nobody wants
please.
them.
Yes.
Nobody wants them, including myself, to have nuclear weapons. But strictly from a military point of view of how we prevent that, once they get to enrichment of, say, 95 to 98%, you can probably have a cup full of uranium that is enriched that much, and that can be enough for a bomb. So once you have about 10 cupfuls, you got enough for 10 bombs. And can that be hidden in places that you can't militarily get to without a ground invasion and taking over every inch of Iran? Probably it will be difficult. So ultimately, the discussion about trying to get an agreement is one that is going to be necessary. I think you can't really bomb them out of the nuclear age. You have to sort of have a negotiation. We have a great deal of leverage. They have an economy that hurts. They have an economy that doesn't do very well. Their people aren't necessarily that happy. But I think we should use our sanctions in a way we rarely do it, and that is to trade them, trade sanction relief and trade and the benefits that come up with that, allowing them to participate in the world market in exchange for them not enriching. And there have been discussions of them not enriching or anything they've enriched above a certain amount, trading that out and not enriching above a certain percentage. And I think that's something we ought to explore. I think Trump is exploring it. And I'm excited, at least optimistic, that these discussions are ongoing.
Very, very interesting. Yesterday, we told you that Donald Trump had cut ties, at least publicly, with Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, because of fears of perceived manipulation by the Israelis on the Americans. Interesting. Donald Trump also cultivated a treaty of peace before leaving office the last time in the Middle East. Can he do it again? And can he get all of that money in the Middle East invested into the United States? Well, so far, at least, he's got $600 billion in deals. And by the way, you can go and look for this yourself on X if you like. When he touched down in Saudi Arabia today, he was treated like a king, like gold. As a matter of fact, the prince himself, who didn't go to greet Joe Biden when he went to Saudi Arabia, the prince himself ushered Donald Trump around old Saudi Arabia in a golf cart today, highly enforced golf cart with many, many Secret Service agents around. And that's one thing I worry about. If Trump is going to start doing these things that are continuing to fly in the face of all of the establishment politicians and bureaucrats, let's just say, there could be and probably will be another attempt on his life very, very soon. By the way, do you guys know how many countries there are in the world that have nuclear weapons? Just take a guess. Throw it down in the comments. I want to see if anybody knows this. Without Googling, without searching for it, please. Just to see if you guys know this stuff. How many countries in the world have nuclear weapons right now? Anybody know? Colleen says 23. That's a bit high. 13, Bob says, that's a little bit high. Agatha says 5. That's a little bit low. Maida says 5. That's low. Ronald says 6 or 8. It's 9. Now, what are the 9 countries that have nuclear weapons? They are obviously the United States, Russia, China. We know those 3. Those are easy. France, the United Kingdom, North Korea, Israel, and Pakistan and India, who were skirmishing just last week, and Donald Trump put an end to that as well. Well, he claims he did. The administration did. They just said, look, if you guys are going to keep fighting like this, we're not going to do any business with you. It's amazing, the power of the dollar. And Donald Trump reestablishing the power of that U.S. petrodollar all over the world. Another question. Do you guys know, I'm not even sure if I should say this, frazzle drip? You guys know this? Anybody? Canada has toilets and masks. And tampons in men's rooms. Anybody know that name? Frazzle drip? Anybody? Michael, I know it too well. Eddie says, yes, I know it. Frazzle drip is what we're going to be concentrating on during the extension tonight for the All Access Nighthawks on shadowdavis.com. And the reason for that is this bombshell that James O'Keefe dropped on X today. Let's watch.
O'Keefe Media is releasing never-before-seen footage from inside the buildings on Jeffrey Epstein's island. The island, known as Little St. James, is located in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Drones have flown overhead in the past, independent journalists have snuck ashore, but no footage or images from inside these buildings has ever been published until now. This footage was captured about a year after Epstein's arrest. In this world exclusive, O'Keefe Media Group takes you through the kitchen inside the main mansion, a villa used for hosting high-profile visitors and events. Through our reporting, we can confirm this footage is authentic. You'll see the entire kitchen is a sterile white with stainless steel appliances. There are sparse decorations, including a few pieces of coral, but there does appear one prominent artwork, a large framed photo of a nude baby in a sink. The baby is holding a phallic-shaped object. The image is hung above the kitchen table. It begs the question, why did Jeffrey Epstein choose to place this image inside of a kitchen where visitors would eat, cook, and entertain? The publication of this footage comes on the heels of a report last week of a royal fixer admitting Prince Andrew had sex with underage girls. And also after a report last week on Attorney General Pam Bondi.
Yeah, and it's all with little kids.
Since those reports aired, we've received an uptick in outreach and tips, and we've heard from these sources that they don't trust anybody due to the lack of transparency and accountability in the United States government. We increasingly find ourselves in a circumstance where none of the criminals in the most powerful institutions in America are held to account for anything. And yet I report to you today, the truth always finds a way, and courage begets courage, which we know is happening as a result of these reports, because people are coming forward to us. Now, for the first time, I'm going to take you on a tour inside the buildings on Epstein Island in a series of video reports. We'll be dropping more soon. Support us and continue to look for our next breaking news on our website at o'keefemediagroup.com. Subscribe and you will get our reports first. And if you are one of the courageous ones who wants to tell the truth and shame the devil, reach out to us on our signal at 914-491-9395. Stay tuned.
Guy's ballsy. That guy's ballsy. So why would a painting like that be hanging in the kitchen of the mansion on Epstein Island? Like, if, of course, he wasn't, you know what. You guys have sure, I'm going to give you one more thing before we split tonight. You've heard the expression family friendly a lot these past few years, right? Family friendly drag show. Those two expressions should not ever collide in the same sentence. Now, I don't know who this mom is. I have no idea who she's speaking to. Obviously, it's some sort of political group, whether it's a school board or a city council. I don't know where it is, but we need more people like her. Watch this.
I don't know what it is that makes a drag show family friendly, because if you follow it to its logical conclusion, you can slap family-friendly titles on anything. You can have family-friendly gentlemen's clubs, family-friendly strip shows, family-friendly 50 Shades of Grey read-alouds. Will you approve my flyer if I want to host in all the sex secrets of the Kama Sutra for kids and families if it's family-friendly? That's my question.
Wow.
What is it about a grown man, and I honestly, sincerely, as a woman, mean this, what is it about a grown man costumed in a sparkly bra with augmented boobs busting out, a leather miniskirt barely covering his twerking ass with tuck tape on his front while spreading his fish-netted legs as he writhes on the ground, grinding his groin next to a minor, family-friendly? You owe us an answer.
No.
And you know, you don't get to hide by just taking something down off Peachtree and calling it a day. You owe an explanation and an apology to everyone. You all got caught with your sparkly panties down. And while we have a culture that has a massive problem with child porn, with sex trafficking, you, a little school district board of adults, made the decision to feature an event to hypersexualize young children. Do you want to know that the word that defines that? It's groomer. You all played the activist pimp for an Align Surgical Center and for a 21-plus gay bar. It makes you groomers and activist pimps, and we won't have those sitting on a school board who oversees the education of our children. You all stepped out of line. You should be ashamed. There's nothing loving. There's nothing, let's unite and include, because the logical conclusion of that is you end up in diabolical evil. There are boundaries, and you don't slap family-friendly titles on stuff to cover your ass.
Whoa. We need about 1,000 of her in every city and town in North America. Frazzle Drip coming up on the extension on shadowdavis.com. If you're not a member, I ask you to join. It helps to support the show, and you get the extra content as well, and a chance to win either the Shadow Davis, once a week we do this, the Shadow Davis 20-ounce mug, there it is, or the Shadow at Night baseball cap. And we make those draws on Thursday nights for the next couple of months. And then I'm going to open it up to to the members as well on shadowdavis.com only for another couple of months. If they want to buy their own stuff, they can go ahead and do that too. Again, that's going to be available only to all access members at shadowdavis.com. So join today. The extension begins in a couple of minutes over there. For the rest of you, I'll catch you tomorrow night, 8 o'clock Central, for another episode. I love you all and I appreciate you all, and I will see you soon. Bye for now.